Warning, warning, this podcast contains spoilers.
Listen at your own risk.
Welcome to Medium Shift, the podcast that investigates how stories stack up from medium to medium through the adaptation process.
Everybody,
Yeah.
rock your body,
Yeah.
Everybody, rock
your
your
body
body right. Rogan's back. All right.
Okay, I was about to sing along with you. I'm glad I stopped myself at the last moment. That was very good. That was very good. Solid couch gag. All right.
This is the end.
Welcome to Medium Shift. I'm Chris.
And I'm Ev.
And we're joining us this day in the studio, the Backstreet Boys. As you heard in that intro, I assume... No, that was some bad singing. I am not looking forward to listening back to that, quite honestly.
Why? Why do I do this to myself? Why did I choose to have so many couch gags in our episodes?
There's all these gaps you perpetually need to fill in from episode by episode, basically.
Fuck you, past Ev.
It's really funny in that, completely coincidentally, almost all of them have ended up being on your shoulders as well. Like, I don't know how that's happened, but I do all of the basic introductory stuff and like the roundup and everything like that, and then you do all of the jokes that follow it. I don't know how that happened, it just did.
Fuck you, past Ev.
Alright, anyway, we're getting distracted. Tangent. Yes, we are continuing Rihannathon with This Is the End, the comedy directed by Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen about a bunch of actors trying to survive the end of the world. So, Ev, what did you think? I don't know why I'm talking like that. What did you think about This Is the End?
Well, Robot Chris.
Chris.
I thought it was alright. I'm usually, with these types of movies, I swing these sort of almost frat boy comedy kind of things. I swing either to loving it or just thinking it's awful. And this one, I don't know, it kind of got stuck in the middle because there are some parts where I'm just like, it's just crass for the sake of being crass. And like, I can understand why other people like it. It's not my type of humor, but I get it. But there were some moments that actually felt like generally good storytelling. And like, especially the dynamic between Seth and Jay as the main characters. I thought they were like the perfect, out of everyone that's in this film, they were the two perfect ones to follow. Yeah,
exactly. That duo, and kind of that story duo more than anything worked quite well, I think. Yeah, of course.
And so I thought, it was perfectly fine. There were some great performances in there. Craig Robinson, I adore. He is hilarious. There are some kind of meh performances, like Danny McBride.
Yeah. I'm not really a fan of Danny McBride in general, in all honesty.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not a huge fan either. Like, I've seen him do some good stuff, but his style of comedy and performance is just not to my taste.
Sure. Yep. That's fair. Interesting. I feel almost exactly the same as you, honestly, in that this kind of fright, gross out, kind of lowbrow comedy is not really for me. Especially the kind of stoner comedy that what's his name, Seth Rogen is always kind of involved with. Yeah. It's just really not my area of enjoyment. I don't tend to find a lot of this particularly funny, but I still thought there was enough amusing and good ideas and just fun and conceptual stuff in this movie that I still thought it was fine. Yeah. Like I do not think it is bad. I think there is definitely some good stuff in there, but it is just not, it is not my type of comedy. Absolutely. Yeah. I can totally understand, and I can definitely appreciate that a lot of people would really enjoy it for all the reasons I don't really, especially on top of all the other really good conceptual stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, just not quite for me as well in some ways. So, great. Interesting. That's going to make things easy enough considering we agree quite closely.
Yeah. The film itself is, as we mentioned, about the apocalypse. And we're talking about it on this episode, so clearly it's adapted. I feel we're kind of stretching it as much as we can in terms of adaptation.
Well, not kind of. Well, yeah. In some respects.
So, technically, it is adapted from a short film called Jay and Seth vs. the Apocalypse, which is a short film starring Jay Baruchel and Seth Rogen
Mm-hmm.
about them surviving the apocalypse. That's about as much of a link it does have to the short film.
Just generally conceptually, just
Yes.
premise-wise. I have not seen it, Elise, but Evan has. So,
Yes.
yeah.
But the original reason we found out about this later after we picked it because our first thought was we were gonna base it on the source material of Revelations,
The Bible book of Revelations.
which of all the movies that I thought would we do as a podcast that would piss off the majority of our audience, I really thought it would have been Life of Brian, honestly.
Yeah, look, we will do Life of Brian one day, absolutely. This is a nice preamble for it, perhaps in some ways, before we hit the big time. Yes, absolutely. So I think they kind of pay lip service to it in the film, but it is supposed to be drawing on like the biblical end of days, essentially, as depicted in the Book of Revelations. On top of it, though, one other additional point I will talk about regarding this being an adaptation is that everyone in this movie is basically playing themselves, which means in some ways it is not necessarily a depiction of real life, but like the characters that they are playing in the film are kind of fictionalized or like satirized versions of themselves in real life, which I think is something definitely worth talking about, considering that is adapting kind of the celebrity image of someone into a fictional version of them. I don't know. I think is a really interesting idea, and I think is absolutely one of the strengths of the movies. So.
Oh yes, everything with that initial party scene, I think, is really good. The way they've done that.
Yeah, exactly.
Michael Cera's character playing Michael Cera.
Yep. I think he's the absolute, as like people playing fictionalized versions of themselves, Michael Cera is the absolute standout.
Yes.
In the very, very much the veneer that he puts off on screen in films like Scott Pilgrim and Juno and things like that, is he's the super awkward, kind of dorky, really shy guy. Like the best way I've heard his acting style described is he feels like a random person who's just wandered on set and has now had a camera stuck in his face and he's not really sure what to do. Like that's kind of the energy that he puts off. But in this movie, they turn him into the most obnoxious drug-addled party boy ever, doing all these horrendous things. He's one of the first to die as well, which I think is very funny. I think
his death quote is him feeling embarrassed because he accused someone else of stealing his phone and he had it in his pocket the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. So that I thought worked really well, and I think there's a lot of that kind of thing throughout of like the fictionalized version of these actors' images that we know, I think is played for laughs in a way that I think is genuinely quite good. The other one as well that I want to point out too is Channing Tatum as well.
Oh, yes.
That cameo is just wild as essentially subservient to Danny McBride. Just that sheer concept alone I think is very funny and playing off the expectations that we have coming from knowing the actors Danny McBride and Channing Tatum. And therefore, I think is a form of adaptation that works in this respect quite well. So,
and it's also the reason that we could include this in Rihanna-thon, because Rihanna plays Rihanna.
Yeah, exactly.
In this. And also does a surprisingly good job, I feel.
Playing herself, yeah. Big surprise. She's not in it very much.
No.
But the scenes that she does have at least, so...
Yes. Yeah. Slapping Michael Cera across the face and telling Craig Robinson to go fuck off.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were done well, and if I'm not mistaken, kind of improvised.
Yeah, in some ways. Apparently, I heard about the behind the scenes of the Michael Cera and Rihanna scene in that Michael Cera kept like just stopping at the last minute because of the way it was being shot. You could always tell it wasn't quite doing it. And so he asked Michael Cera asked Rihanna if he could do it for real. And she said, yeah, that's fine, but just know I'm going to be slapping you for real. And so they go through multiple takes and things like that, and she keeps turning around and slapping him. But what she didn't tell him is that every single time they do a take, she's slapping him harder, basically. So by the end of basically the shots, when they did it, I don't know, 5-10 times or something, she's trying to knock him out every time he goes for it, which I think is quite funny. So,
yeah, and that scene with Craig Robinson singing to the group, I believe that entire thing was just come up on the fly on set.
Yeah.
And so him singing, that was a song from his previous set that he adapted for the film. And Rihanna improvised her singing along with that. And that kind of really helps with, I feel, it adapting reality, because improvisation is a lot closer to reality than it would be scripted.
Yeah, of course. Like it is playing off the personalities themselves, exactly. So, yeah. From what I heard, it's been a little bit conflicted, but So the two directors, Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. Seth Rogen has come on and basically said that like around half the film was improvised, but Evan Goldberg said it was around like 85%.
Yeah.
But either way, like a lot of the movie was basically put together on the fly, just with all these actors basically just having their kind of, fictional representations kind of jump off each other and things like that. Like the Milky Bar scene was completely improvised as well, which I thought was very good. So there's a lot of that stuff in there, and I think it's the effortless stuff that kind of works the best more than anything, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, because you have to be very careful when you sort of do that adaptation of real life, that things can either feel incredibly fake and off-putting or too accurate, and that kind of throws the audience off because then you're sort of not actually invested in the story and you're just looking at the characters.
Yeah, sure. So it's I don't know, I think it plays a really even though a lot of the comedy is not to my style, I think it plays like a very like good fine line between a lot of this feeling like the energy that the group has and just the dynamics between so many actors is really good, and you can tell that they were like very like properly bouncing off each other on set and things like that. So yeah, there was one apparently game that the director Evan Goldberg played on set.
Yes.
Well, I assume you heard about that as well. Where he just tried to get as many actors as he possibly could to get to the point where they say, no, I won't do that. Apparently, everyone on the cast failed that except for James Franco and Seth Rogen. Those two were up for anything, apparently.
And even apparently, Seth Rogen was trying to get James Franco to do stuff that he wouldn't do, and James Franco still kept doing it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's kind of very funny, and I think it's probably the reason the movie works as well as it does, and especially for people who like this type of comedy, like I'm sure would be over the moon with this. But like it is clear that the creative process behind it worked well enough for the comedy being created for it to actually feel like quite effortless and genuinely funny sometimes. Even outside of all the crass jokes, there is still really, really funny stuff in here. So yeah.
Usually, again, based on their sort of personas. Like, there was one great joke about what I hope will be a future episode in Seth Rogen and the Green Hornet.
Oh, yes. Yeah, for sure. Where was that in the Green Hornet? That's pretty good. And even just them playing off the idea that they're all actors as well. Like, we're all actors. We're important. We bring joy to people's lives.
And the fact that no one noticed that the apocalypse was happening in Franco's house.
Yeah.
None of them were good enough for saving.
Exactly. It's so funny. Yes. So some of that is really good.
Yes.
The one I'm very curious about. Now, it's kind of difficult to talk about like how similar some of the actors are to their real life personalities, because obviously we don't know. It's more about the image of them as celebrities in some way. I think Seth Rogen kind of leans into that in some respects, as like the classic kind of stoner bro-y guy essentially. There's it's a very clear image of such what Seth Rogen would be. Jonah Hill is one I'm super curious about, because I've heard some questionable things about him on set, and so I thought that the whole idea of him being this super kind of nice guy that is super manipulative and backstabby behind the scenes or something like that was kind of funny, but I just don't know how true to life it is.
Yeah, I don't really know either. I'm not super invested in like these kinds of backstories.
Well, neither do I, at least. I always try and I focus on the career rather than I do the person in some ways. But I do think that there are, for people who are more familiar with the actors in these movies, it's possible there might be additional jokes that we're missing out on because of that. So
I get that a lot. And also with the character of James Franco being James Franco, I do know a bit more about his sort of persona and celebrity status. Yeah. And how he's seemingly quite creepy. And this, he kind of comes off as like paranoid but lovable. Which was a stark contrast. Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, it is obviously like, considering they are theoretically playing themselves, they don't want to come off as massive assholes in some way, outside of just like Danny McBride and things like that, who are clearly very much enjoying, because that's the kind of persona that they play. Yeah. So I think probably the best way to understand the kind of characters they are playing is that they're an amalgamation of them in real life and the characters they normally play. Yes. Like the image they put off on screen, basically. Like Seth Rogen is playing not only Seth Rogen, but also playing every other Seth Rogen character that he has already played. So it is the same with most of the people in this movie. And that also sort of fuels the storyline between Seth and Jay, because Seth has gone and changed in his acting performance over time. And like he is also can be quite the serious and professional actor. Sure, he's a legitimately good actor when he needs to be. I absolutely love him. Even though they made jokes about it, I actually really like the Green Hornet. Really? Yeah. Wow.
Okay. I'm not going to stand by with you on that, in all honesty. Though I haven't seen it in years, but...
Yeah, but yeah, and Jay, I've liked some of his work, but his hasn't changed all that much either, but he still keeps it sort of... He's more in line with the sort of... that more slightly serious kind of rom-com-y kind of thing.
Yeah,
I absolutely love him in She's Out of Your League.
Oh, sure, okay.
And that he's sort of playing that sort of same quirky teenage character, and their story is them working out whether they've gone too far or staying same, not changing. And so it feeds in really well with the story. And I think that worked. And I think that's why I felt so like happy with their storyline, because it felt so true. Even if they were fictionalized versions of themselves, it still like worked.
Sure, it felt true to the character personas that they normally play. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's really good. And I think your mileage for this film in many respects, we've kind of touched on already, will vary depending on how well you know these actors and their careers leading up to it and the usual personas they play and things like that. So
They even make jokes about Pineapple Express.
Yeah, exactly. Like that whole Pineapple Express sequel, which is apparently what they actually wanted to do for the sequel. Like that was basically just them spitballing, which is very, very funny. Like absolutely playing off themselves as actors, but also as the roles they normally play. Yeah. So I think it's very funny. Like as I said, like even if I don't love a lot of the comedy in this, like that genuine concept of them playing kind of heightened, like stereotypical versions of themselves, I think lends itself really well to some really good jokes, and they take full advantage of it, I think. So, yeah.
Although I was at one point basically snapped out of the reality of the movie when Emma Watson's character came in, and the fact that Emma Watson was not taken up to heaven clearly broke my suspension of disbelief.
Sure. I'll give you that at least. Yeah. I think
she's a UN ambassador. I think she's going to get to heaven.
She's doing okay.
Yeah.
At least, based on the laws of the movie, like you decide to sacrifice yourself, and yep, you're good. You're heading up. I think the overall joke of the movie obviously is the fact that they are all actors and therefore terrible people, which is why they were not saved during the rapture. So, which is amusing unto itself, and Emma Watson feeds into that, even if in real life, sure, she's a much better person than the movie plays her out to be. I'll give you that. Apparently, it was supposed to be Daniel Radcliffe originally, or he was going to make a cameo in the movie.
Yes, that was the early stages, and then it was. I think her character was written for Mila Kunis.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of as well. Yeah,
and then they adjusted it for her when she came in.
Yeah, sure. It's I mean, there were already so many celebrity cameos in this movie.
Yeah, but
they wanted to pile in as many as they conceivably could. Just bring in all of their friends, which is very good. Interesting. Cool. Well, now that we've generally touched on like the idea of like them playing themselves and the celebrity status and such, did you want to talk about the short movie at all, or should I get into the Book of Revelations and the end of the world as we know it?
I'll quickly touch on the short film so you can get into your big religious spiel.
Yes.
I'm scared though, because I've accidentally joined too mmany cults this year.
With me, honestly. I think we're all in the same cults together.
Oh, God.
Drink the Kool-Aid. That's my second drink the Kool-Aid joke today. Oh, that's bad. That's very bad. Sorry. No, yes.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the short film is much like the film in the fact that it's Seth Rogen and Jay Baruchel trying to survive the apocalypse. Goes for about 10 minutes. They're playing heightened versions of themselves, living in the short film. It's sort of an undisclosed apocalypse. You don't see anything on the outside. It's all set in their dirty apartment. And it involves Jay having to go up and fix the water while creatures are outside. And it ends on a really weirdly, like, somber note.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I won't spoil it too much. But yes.
Sure.
Somber note, and not as slapstick as the film actually turned out to be. If there's any sort of humor, it comes from the dialogue, and it's very much like... One of the jokes is the fact that Jay is designing an ark, which is basically a closet with a door attached.
So a closet?
Yes.
Yep.
And the fact that it can only fit one person.
Oh, right.
And it's his backup if Seth were to apparently die, at which Seth goes, dude, that's not fair.
That's not okay. Yeah, sure. Okay. Yep.
And stuff like that. Oh, and the fact that Jay was in the bathroom, so Seth was peeing in a bucket. And it's like, doesn't really matter where the bucket is. Where if I gotta go, I gotta go.
Yep. So, like, as similarities go, it is the general premise of obviously just the two of them trying to survive the apocalypse, but that's
Yes.
where the similarities end. Like,
Yep, pretty much.
Okay, sure. It's more conceptually similar than anything
Yes.
else. So
The idea of them as themselves, trying to playing heightened versions of themselves in an apocalyptic scenario,
yeah, sure.
and
exactly.
testing their friendship.
Yeah, okay. So it was more
Yeah.
for when they expanded in for the film itself. That's when they brought in like the biblical idea of the Book of Revelations
Yes.
and everything like that. So it's yeah. So if we're going to generally talk about this kind of tongue in cheek, the way it uses the idea of the rapture in Christian mythology, I was raised in a church. I've read the Book of Revelations
Oh, wow.
a couple of times. Yeah, when I was younger. I do not consider myself one now, but at the very least. But I find it very interesting in some respects. I mean, obviously, considering it is the Bible, people have debated this and discussed this for years, so I'm not going to get into all of it because it is impossible to. But the general perception is that Revelations is supposed to be kind of a either metaphorical or more literal representation of what is going to happen during the end of days, which is basically when Jesus is supposed to come down, the devil is going to take over the earth, and such. A lot of the details around that, there's always a lot of contention about whether it is being literal in the book or whether it should be interpreted as metaphor, or like essentially how it is going to play out. A lot of the depictions of Revelations, this film in particular, takes it literal, basically, that like a lot of the Christians will be saved off the earth and taken to heaven, and then everyone left will be kind of set through like a final trial, basically, during the end of days where they must prove that they are essentially like deserve to be in heaven. Normally the way Revelation is perceived, it is that it is not necessarily the righteous or the worthy that get saved to heaven, but the Christians. Like, if you have given yourself to God and consider yourself a Christian, then you were saved during the beginning of in the rapture, during the beginning of the end of days, as opposed to being a good person, which, based on that respect, means that there's probably a lot of pedophile priests in heaven.
Oh, God.
Yep, that's a whole other thing. But in this, they kind of turn it around and make it less about the fact that you are a repenting Christian. It's possible that might have been part of it. Maybe that's why Emma Watson wasn't trapped to heaven.
Oh, yeah.
But it's more
And
about...
given most of the cast are Jewish or of Jewish descent.
Yeah, exactly. But they kind of turn it around to this to being a moral stance, in that you kind of need to redeem yourself or be perceived in the eyes of heaven as a good person.
Yeah.
There's a lot of additional things that come to Revelations. What they kind of do in this movie is less kind of 4 plagues and the world slowly turn into ash and things like that, and it's more just straight out apocalypse.
Yep.
Like, it's literally just everything is on fire, there are sinkholes opening up, and there are demons walking around. Kind of like as a really heightened, pseudo-satirized version of what Revelations is kind of implying. Like, that kind of death and destruction is obviously part of it. But it is more like, we will send 4 plagues, and on the 7th day, this will happen, and that will happen, and that kind of thing, as opposed to just the world ending. So in some respects, even if it is technically representing the Revelations version of the apocalypse, it is also just kind of a generic apocalypse in some respects. It is mostly the fact that people are redeemed, and the demons are literally kind of the only 2 things that tie it to a certain mythology, as opposed to just being a generic end of the world, end of days kind of thing. So,
Well, there is one of my favorite lines is the fact that Jay is talking about reading a passage like, and the mountains will be on fire. Isn't that what's happening with the Hollywood Hills? Like, well, they're not really mountains. I could drive across it without traffic in about 10 minutes.
yeah, it's more of a hill, if anything. So, and it's also like, that is a mountain. That doesn't mean it is the mountain, and that kind of thing. So yeah, it is almost kind of like, it's, once again, this movie is not taking itself seriously at all. So the way it is representing the Christian apocalypse is super loose, and it's just kind of dependent on whatever else they need for the film itself. Like, the whole idea of like a demon, like, what's his name, Jonah Hill, praying to Satan, and then a demon impregnating him and things like that.
Wasn't he praying to God?
Was it? I don't remember.
And then I think just because the fact that he was praying to God about trying to murder Jay.
Yeah, that's right. So basically the whole idea of him being impregnated by a demon and things like that, that's not at all related to, at least as far as I'm aware, anything in Revelations.
That's closer to Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, I was about to say, it is more a spoof of Rosemary's Baby, and is therefore more interested in kind of like the general idea of like Christian demons and things like that. Like, it is literal, almost line for line, the scene from Rosemary's Baby. And then right after that, it's almost it's a jokingly like alluded to version of the scene from The Exorcist, to the point where they call it out, and he's like, well, they must have done their research, right? Like, So in that respect, it is less about trying to be obviously like interested in the Book of Revelations and more just the general idea of like demons and hell and Christian mythology and anything just to make fun of it, basically. And I think in that respect, I think it works well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's totally fine.
It was just your basic run-of-the-mill apocalypse.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
with very loose ideas of heaven.
Yeah, I think the redemption thing is quite funny. Like the idea, especially of James Franco, of suddenly being redeemed, and then he's going up, he's flipping everyone off, and that suddenly makes him a bad person again. I think that is kind of good. Like conceptually, I think they took the vague idea of people, like the righteous people being saved, and then turn it into a thing for comedy. I think that is very good. There are obviously like other depictions of the rapture and things like Left Behind, which is a book series and a film. The Leftovers as well, obviously, is another really good example, but it's always played for much more dramatic respects. And the way they kind of shifted that idea into more comedic purposes, I thought worked really well. Great. I don't know if there's anything else.
Mad Max the comedy kind of thing.
Mad Max the comedy. Yeah, sure. I think that's kind of it. Like, I don't really know what else there is to say regarding as an adaptation of Revelations more than anything. So it feels almost like a loose series of skits vaguely themed around demons and hell and the end of the world more than anything explicitly. So
They basically came up with the joke of actors are so self-righteous that none of them are getting to heaven.
yeah,
And
exactly.
they just went, yep, let's make that a movie.
Yep, and that's just generally the premise, and I think it works well. So
Yeah.
cool. Is there anything else we want to talk about regarding Revelations? This is the end. Other funny things in the movie you want to call out?
I think we're pretty covered. I've already mentioned how I love Craig Robinson.
He's quite good.
Yes.
I
In a
did-
lot of things.
Yep, I do think it was very funny how they so frequently like metatextually comment on their own films and things
Yes.
like that as well. Like
The cardboard cutout of James Franco as Green Goblin.
yeah, exactly, that kind of stuff. It's really fun. There was a little bit at the beginning that I thought was almost like they were poking fun at people who heckle celebrities. Like people saying hi to
yes.
Seth Rogen is like, hey, do the Seth Rogen laugh and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that feels like something they would legitimately take honest with. So I thought that was worthwhile putting in there. There was one really, really funny moment, and once again kind of talks to the idea of about it being more of a generic apocalypse. When Jay and Craig leave the house to go to the other one, and they walk past a playground.
Oh, yes.
And they're like, oh, it's so sad. It's such a metaphor for innocence lost.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's very good. That's very, very calling it out like that. Very clearly, kind of, I think, indicates the way that they were approaching the idea of the apocalypse. So, I thought that was very funny. Yeah. Outside of that, like, I think there's some legitimately fun stuff, and I think on a pure conceptual level, I think this movie is really good. Just a lot of the humor is not to my taste. Yeah. So, yeah.
There's another bit that I love, but it wasn't in the actual film. It was in the sort of alternate lines that they had for some of the scenes. But it was as the sort of rioter character actor, kind of commercial actor, bursts his head through before it gets chopped off.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The guy who plays Google in those videos.
Yeah, that's right. He's really good.
He is. I like him a lot. But there was a joke about him trying to get... He basically started improvising these lines about George Clooney and how he's a bit of a dick. Or he was already dead when the apocalypse started because his hands were cut off and attached to the fence. Or...
It's very good.
So yeah, and you do like this film. I do recommend finding those like golden eggs because there are some great jokes that just did not make the cut.
I can guarantee that there'd be so much like, especially not only additional jokes, but just like ad libs and stuff that just ended up on the cutting room floor. Would not be surprised at all considering how many people were in that movie just riffing on each other. So yeah, fantastic.
Oh, and we also got a very small Superbad reunion.
Yeah, true. It was kind of fun. I'm kind of surprised they didn't call that out, honestly.
No, I think it was just the fact that they had the three of them, and it was like, oh, I haven't seen you guys in a while, and it was just
that's
like,
fair.
subtly.
Yeah,
played.
it's just subtle is not normally the way I would describe this type of comedy. That's all. So, shall we move into do it differently then?
Sure.
Yep.
Want to go first?
No. First thing we need to do is
Jingle, jingle, jingle.
I can't believe you forgot. Come on, you've never forgotten before.
I didn't forget. I was just waiting for the... I thought, you go first, but I don't know. Forget it.
Yeah, okay. I will go first this week at least, or this episode. What I would generally do for this is like maintain the premise of basically a bunch of actors playing themselves, a big ensemble cast, make it a comedy, set in all one location basically, but completely transition the outside premise to something completely different. So actually what I would want to do is to see the upper crust of British acting elite in a fake play together, basically, where they are trapped in a theatre as they get murdered one by one. So basically have the likes of like Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart and Dame Judi Dench and everything like that, basically in a fake play afterwards where they're kind of locked in and they're kind of being picked off one by one as a comedy in a very similar vibe, but obviously with a much more British sensibility. You can even make Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart like the main duo and just have them as buddies the whole time, because that's basically what they are in real life. And kind of play off their real life personas in that way. It's basically taking the things from the movie that I really like, which is that general concept and premise, and that source of comedy, and then turning it into something that I would legitimately enjoy, which is a British murder mystery with a bunch of amazing actors. So, yep. It's not really a do it differently and just completely differently. Like, it's almost completely changing the film, obviously. But I just think it'd be a really fun idea. Yeah.
Damn it.
What?
Yours is both kind of similar to mine, but also way better.
Oh, okay. All right. You should have gone first.
Yes.
We should really figure this out beforehand.
Yeah. Oh, well. So mine is kind of similar to what was originally pitched.
Okay.
In that it was a whole bunch of actors working on a like movie or film in a studio, and then everything goes to hell, and it's sort of all that. So there's this TV show. It was made by Charlie Brooker, and it was about the Big Brother house if the zombie apocalypse happened whilst they were filming.
Oh, I think I've heard of this before. Do you remember what it's called? Or?
I cannot write off the top of my head,
Okay,
unfortunately.
You keep talking. I'm going to Google it.
Okay, but basically, I kind of want something like that. I don't want to go full revelations. I want them to tone the apocalypse back into something a bit more sort of mysterious. Just like various plagues, zombies, demons, bit of everything. Just throw it all in there with all hell, and basically then fortifying down a studio, effectively. Kind of mix it in with, so a bit of that show, a bit of this with the whole actors playing themselves and amping it up and trying to use prop weapons and things against these monsters, and also a mix in a bit of a almost like Dead Rising, the video game series.
Yeah, sure. Like the wild weapons and things like that.
Yes.
Yep.
And the fact that you've just sort of basically fortified down this one big section to stop all the evils coming in before rescue can come in. So I reckon that's sort of what I'd sort of aim for, and keeping with like a pretty similar cast, I reckon.
Okay, sure. No, that sounds great.
Yeah.
The series, I think it was called Dead Set.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one, sir. I've heard very good things about it. But no, I really like that idea as well. So this is, once again, one of those things, like the general idea of just a bunch of people playing themselves and spoofing actors and all that is just a great source of comedy, I think.
Whilst the end of the world happens.
Yeah, what's the end of the world? Like, you can take it in so many different directions, I think. So, yeah, no, super fun. You could even do, like, a spin-off to This Is the End, like, just a house over or something like that, where a completely different celebrity party was going on, and figure out what happened to them. So, yeah, no, it's real fun. Cool. All right, that sounds delightful. Shall we move into random recommendations, then?
Yep, we shall.
Sure. All right. What have you got for us this episode?
The Green Hornet.
Oh, okay, sure. I should have seen that coming, actually.
Yes, I brought it up, and there was actually, while watching this movie, I thought there are two potential episodes that I'd really like to do that I was reminded of while watching this. One of them was Kick-Ass.
Oh, yeah.
For obvious reasons, and the other was Green Hornet for obvious reasons.
Sure.
And I will admit, I haven't seen it in a while, but watching it when it first came out, I just thought it was such a fun film. Christoph Waltz played such a brilliant, like, hammy, over-the-top villain.
Is he the villain?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. I have very, very faint memories of this movie. I saw it when it came out, I haven't seen it since, so...
No, I just thought it was a lot of fun. I really do like Seth Rogen in all his non-frat boy gross-out films.
Sure.
I don't mind it, especially when he's working with, like, Judd Apatow.
Sure.
And there are a lot of these types of, like, lowbrow comedies that I absolutely adore. Like, weirdly, I'm a big fan of Van Wilder. And the second sequel, or the third in the trilogy, Van Wilder prequels, the freshman years. Not such a fan of the second one. But those kind of films I weirdly enjoy. And this one, The Green Hornet, it's sort of a nice mixture of just about everything. And even though it's sort of a superhero film, it's a nice sort of like breather from the high octane stuff, because everything is a lot more sort of calmer. Everything just feels a bit more down to earth. And I think it's a nice little, just something to sort of peruse while you're sort of in between the sort of more intense films. Something you can relax to.
Okay, no, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, if we're going to do an episode on it, I would be curious to watch it again and see how my perspective's changed. So, great. In comparison, I'm going to be also recommending a related movie, but quite different, In the World's End. This was a film that actually got This Is the End to change its name because it was too similar to its title, The World's End, and it was coming out around the same time, basically. Starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, is the third film of the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy, directed by Edgar Wright, the first two being Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, both fantastic movies. And this one being the third, a lot of people kind of overlook it. I think this is probably a lot of people's least favorite of the three, but I still really, really like it. I will go to bat for this movie. It's essentially just, it is a pub crawl. A bunch of like old friends who haven't hung out in ages get back together for a pub crawl while shall we say, some curious sci-fi things go on in the background. So it's really good. It's really fresh and entertaining, extremely funny. Like all of Edgar Wright's movies, it's very, very witty. If you like Hot Fuzz or Shaun of the Dead, you'll absolutely enjoy this one as well. And I think it is excellent and absolutely recommend it. So, and much more my style of comedy than This Is the End. So,
Ooh, on that note, there is one more that I just thought of because it stars Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, and Seth Rogen, and that's Paul.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen it, but I have heard of it. So, you would recommend it?
I would. Like, I didn't think much of it when I was going in. I thought it was just going to be another sort of weird, sort of American, almost frat boy-like humor.
Sure.
But it turned out surprisingly good.
Okay, great.
I think mainly because of Simon Pegg and Nick Frost and how it did not take itself super seriously, but also it was made by sci-fi fans for sci-fi fans.
Yeah, sure, which is always appreciated.
Yes.
Yeah, great. I'll have to give that one a watch at some point as well. It's been on my list for quite a while. I just haven't got around to it. Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you to everyone who listened to this episode of Medium Shift. We can be found at mediumshift@gmail.com. Feel free to send in whatever you so desire. I don't know, your predictions for the end of the world, your interpretation of the Book of Revelations. Whatever you want. We're here for it. We'll just happily accept all emails.
We'll accept bottle caps, because I'm pretty sure that's, if video games have taught me anything, that's the currency of the apocalypse.
Bottle caps are very, very important. In Pokemon as well.
Yeah.
I realized the other day, bottle caps are kind of essential in the last few games. Yeah. Especially, end game stuff, which I guess is relevant to the apocalypse. So,
get ready for our Patreon that's entirely bottle cap based.
Yeah. It's going to be real fun. We're going to be so wealthy when the bombs finally start dropping sometime in the future. Probably sooner than we think. Next episode, we're going to be continuing Rihannathon with a continuation of a beloved franchise with an all-female cast that didn't do very well at the box office.
Like, which one are we talking about?
That's the idea, isn't it? I'm doing it vague. It's real clever. But
Ocean's 8.
I was about to say, only one of them has Rihanna actually in it, so you could probably figure that out. But yes, we're going to be doing Ocean's 8. So
get ready for part 3 of our in-depth analysis of Robin Rihanna Taya? I can't remember her name.
Robin? I don't know. I didn't know she had a name outside of Rihanna. I don't even know what music she makes.
We are clearly the best people to be doing this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's why we're doing a podcast, because we are so incredibly well informed.
Fenty. That's her last name.
Oh, there you go.
Robin Rihanna Fenty.
You learn something new every day until I completely forget it moments later.
Who are you?
Until next time, fare thee well.
It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel everybody.
Yeah.
Rock your body. This is the end, my only friend. The end. Copyright claims.
Good.
I didn't know which one to do, so I did all three.
Yeah, why not? I don't know how I'm going to cut that together, but sure.
No clue.